The storm came down from the mountains like something alive, a black wall swallowing the sky, bending the grass flat and howling across the plains with a fury that made even seasoned cowboys whisper prayers under their breath, and Caleb Hart was no stranger to storms. But this one made his horse snort and sidestep like it sensed death riding the wind. Caleb was riding back from the northern ridge, coat pulled tight, eyes narrowed against the dust and rain that began to sting his face like thrown gravel, when he saw something that didn't belong, movement, near the dry arroyo where nothing ever moved at this hour. At first he thought it was a coyote, then a piece of cloth caught on brush, but then lightning split the sky, and for a single frozen heartbeat, he saw them clearly. An Apache woman clutching a small child, both soaked, stumbling, half-blind in the rising chaos. Caleb's hand tightened on the reins. In this land, people didn't just wander into storms. They ran from them, and Apache women didn't run toward white ranch land unless something was terribly wrong. Thunder crashed so hard the ground shook, and the child cried, a thin, desperate sound swallowed almost instantly by the wind. Caleb didn't think. He kicked his horse forward. As he rode closer, he saw the woman's face, cut, bruised, eyes wide not with fear of him, but with something worse, exhaustion mixed with the certainty that she could not take another step. She turned when she heard the horse, instinctively shielding the child, her body tense like a drawn bow, ready to flee even though her legs were trembling. Caleb raised both hands slowly, rain streaming down his hat brim, shouting over the wind that he wouldn't hurt them, that the storm would kill them both if they stayed out here. She didn't answer. Another lightning strike lit the world white, and in that flash, Caleb saw blood soaking the woman's shawl. The child, no more than 5, was burning with fever, lips cracked, eyes glassy. The storm roared louder, rain turning to sheets, the arroyo already beginning to fill. Caleb knew that in minutes it would flood, and anyone caught there would be dragged under like a stone. He dismounted carefully, step by step, speaking calmly though his heart hammered. And when the woman finally collapsed to her knees, it wasn't fear that made her let go, it was gravity. Caleb caught the child as the woman fell, the boy limp and frighteningly light in his arms. For one awful second, Caleb thought the child was already gone. Then the boy coughed weakly. No time, no choices. Caleb wrapped the child inside his coat, lifted the woman with an arm around her waist, and forced them both toward his horse as the storm screamed its fury. Mounting with 2 extra bodies in driving rain was nearly impossible, but desperation gives strength, and soon all 3 were clinging together as the horse surged forward. Hooves slipping, wind nearly knocking them sideways. The world disappeared into rain and thunder. The ranch lights were still miles away. The woman lost consciousness halfway there, her head falling against Caleb's chest, and as he felt how thin she was, how her breath came shallow and broken, he realized this rescue wasn't just about outrunning a storm. It was about outrunning death itself. When they finally reached the ranch house, lightning struck so close it shattered a fence post, and Caleb barely made it inside before the sky opened fully behind them. He laid the woman and child near the fire, shouting for help, tearing off wet clothes, fighting panic as the boy's fever worsened and the woman's breathing slowed. Outside, the storm raged like it wanted them back, and as Caleb watched the Apache mother lie unconscious on his floor, he had no idea that saving her life tonight would mark him as an enemy by morning, and that what she would reveal when she woke would shake the entire valley. If this story has you hooked already, don't forget to subscribe, because what comes next changes. Everything morning came slow and heavy, like the land itself was afraid to wake after the violence of the night, and Caleb Hart sat at the small wooden table with his coffee untouched, eyes fixed on the fire as it crackled low, his mind replaying the sound of thunder mixed with that child's weak cry, because storms he could handle. Blood he had seen before, but the weight of what he'd brought into his home pressed on him harder than any saddle ever had. The Apache woman woke just after dawn, her breath catching sharp as a knife as her eyes flew open, her body trying to rise before pain dragged her back down. And Caleb was there instantly, hands open, voice calm, telling her she was safe, that the storm had passed, that her child was alive. At the word alive, something broke in her, and tears slid silently into her dark hair as she turned her head toward the bed where her son slept. wrapped in blankets, his fever finally easing. She watched him like someone watching fire in the wilderness, grateful, terrified it might go out. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse, but strong with pride. She told Caleb her name was Neol, and her son's name was Taza. She thanked him not with bows or dramatics, but with the simple gravity of someone who understood what a life debt meant. But gratitude did not soften the truth that followed. Neol told him they had not been running from the storm alone. They were running from men, white men, men wearing badges and carrying rifles, who had come to their camp under the promise of peace and trade, only to burn it when they didn't get the gold they believed was hidden nearby. Her husband had stood between them and their child. He had died with a bullet through his chest, buying them time to flee into the mountains, with nothing but the clothes on their backs. As Neol spoke, Caleb's jaw tightened, because he knew those men, not by face but by reputation. Deputies turned hunters, lawmen who wore justice like a costume when it suited them, and as if the land itself wanted to prove her right. Horses appeared on the ridge before noon. 3 riders, rifles visible, moving slow and deliberate, searching. Caleb knew then there would be no clean ending to this. When the riders approached the ranch, Caleb stepped outside alone, meeting them halfway, his posture calm but ready. They asked questions with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Asked if he'd seen an Apache woman. A child claimed they were dangerous, claimed there had been an attack. Caleb lied without blinking, said no one had come through his land but cattle and rain. The men didn't like that answer. One of them noticed the extra horse prints. Another glanced toward the house where smoke still rose from the chimney. The tension snapped like dry wood. A rifle came up. Caleb moved faster. The first shot missed. The second didn't. The gunfight was short and brutal. Thunder replaced by gunfire, dust replaced by rain. When it ended, 2 men lay wounded, 1 dead, and the truth lay bare in the open air. By the time neighbors arrived, drawn by shots, the story had already chosen its side. Caleb did not hand Neol over. He stood between her and the mob that gathered, between lies and truth, between fear and honor. And something unexpected happened. The child stepped forward, small hand gripping Caleb's coat, eyes clear now, fearless. The sight of that broke something in the crowd. They saw not an enemy, but a family shattered by greed. Word spread fast. The valley shifted. The deputies' actions were exposed. The violence stopped. Weeks later, when Neol and Taza left to join surviving kin beyond the mountains, she placed her hand over Caleb's heart and told him his name would be carried in Apache stories as one who chose humanity over hate. Caleb watched them disappear into the horizon, knowing his life would never be the same, knowing some rescues don't just save lives, they redraw the line between right and wrong.